Hi guys, thanks for joining me. This is a tutorial for our new leaf that we've just released, which is the Sycamore, and the template is available in 3 different sizes. That's 80mm, 100mm and 120mm, and that's the width of the leaf. I'm going to quickly run through the tools and equipment that I'm going to be using. I have my foam mat under here with, of course, my flat mat and a felt topper. I'm going to be using my multi-handle needle and my multi-punch tool, and I've got my single needle, which is my 40 spiral. I will of course be using my pocket scale for weighing out the small increments of wool used in each of the different sizes of the template. The wool that I'm going to be using today is our autumn gold colour, and this is one of 4 new colours that we've just released for the autumnal season. Do please hit like on the video, and if you're not already, please do subscribe to the channel. Hit that little bell icon and that'll tell you when we upload new videos. So let's hop straight in and start making one of our lovely sycamore leaves. I'm very quickly going to talk about the 3 different sizes of templates. Now, I'm not going to lie to you, the templates they're quite fiddly, so they're going to need a little bit of extra time to get the fibres laid down in the template so that you come out with a really good result, but the extra effort is well worth it. The large one is 120mm, and the biggest problem with this one is making sure as you're putting down all of the pieces that you get a good overlap across, because you're going to be pulling off pinches to go in each of these sort of recesses. So when you're doing this one, it's really important to make sure that you get a good amount of overlap and obviously a nice even covering. The way that I do it is I put in all of the points and then sort of backfill. But again, you're going to be laying down the fibres really gently. The small one presents a slightly different problem in that the little points are exactly that. They're a lot smaller, so you're going to be using a lot less wool, and getting the shape just requires a little bit of extra refining at the end. The middle one is, well, it's kind of a merge between the two. You've got to make sure that you do get that overlap, whereas the small one, when you put your fibres in, you automatically get a little bit more overlap because it's a smaller template. So I just want to sort of give you that information up front. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start making one of these sycamore leaves. I thought that the medium-sized template would probably be a good one to show you. I'm not going to do all 3 on screen, as that would obviously be a really long tutorial. So hopefully this will provide the sort of the best of both worlds, and I can demonstrate you know, the different kind of aspects of putting this one together. As always, the template has a wiring hole, so if you are going to be putting this leaf together with an armature, then you've got that wiring hole at the bottom. I will put up a little kind of armature reference. With these leaves, any armatures, you need to think about where you want to support, and because there are various sort of outcroppings of this leaf, personally with all 3 of the templates I would put an armature up here, and up here, and just some loops of 26 gauge wire for these templates. The small template you can probably use 1 wire. The medium and large template may require 2 wires, but a small loop of wire up in those kind of areas would be ideal. I think you could also use a pipe cleaner. So I've weighed out, what's this? No, it's not naught. It's 1.5 grams. I think that's probably there or thereabouts. I will pop up the weights and measures on screen for you so that you've got them to hand. Also, don't forget that you can hop over to the website under the project infos and downloads link, and you will find a list of all of the weights and measures for all of the templates that we do. Okay, enough waffling from me. Let's get in and start making this leaf. My mat throughout this will be turning round. The first thing I just want to point out, I'm going to be using my 40 spiral, and it's a very, very delicate needle. It's a very light needle, and it's my go-to for just about everything. I like the light needles for putting the initial sort of spread of fibre down into a template. I'm going to be working on my flat mat, and for those of you who do have the flat mat, you will be thanking yourself for getting it. Because this template needs to stay in place, and the flat mat will help you sort of not drive fibres out too far in your project. So we will obviously, if you're working on a different surface, you just want to be mindful that you're not pushing your fibres out through the bottom and into your surface, otherwise you're going to end up with a fluffy bottom. We don't want fluffy bottoms. Okay, so what I'm going to do is you start off by pulling off a pinch, and there's no weights and measures to this. I'm going to orient my leaf that way. I'm going to start in the top, so we're going to crack on with this. I get my little piece of fibre, I bend back the top because you can see that gives you a real neat edge, rather than putting it into the template with all of this frizz. Just nip back the top and then put that rolled edge up into that little tack. And when you do this, you want to make sure that you get a good amount of frizz, because we're going to be using this to overlap with everything else. So again, pull off another piece. Obviously, the smaller the little ticks that you're going to be filling, the smaller the piece of wool that you're going to want to be using. So I'm going to just pop a little bit in that one. And I'm just piercing my mat. You know, as soon as I feel the density of that flat mat, I'm stopping. And what that will mean is that I will be able to lift this up once I've got everything in place. So I'm going to go back and just put in a little bit right there. And this is just rinse and repeat all the way around now. I am going to stay on camera and do the whole thing. So for those of you who are slightly newer to using the templates, you can actually see me do the whole thing. So I filled in, you can see, I filled in that part. This is very, very lightly tacked to my surface. And as I put in the next part, I'm just going to make sure that my template is nestled back where it was before. I'm going to hold it, pop a bit more up in there, slightly bigger piece to go in here. I am going to try and do this as quickly as I can, and what you're also looking for is to sort of lay down evenly. You don't want sort of ups and downs. So I've got this big sort of hole bit in the middle, and I'm not going to worry about that too much right now. I'm going to put down a little bit of fibre, and I'm making sure that it's overlapping all of this edge that I've just put down. And again, very, very light stabs. As soon as I feel myself hit that mat, I'm stopping. I'm not driving in. So there's lots to sort of consider with this template. You've got the overlap, plus you've got the trying to sort of lay down the even spread of fibres. So I'm going to pop right up into that end there. Take a little bit down into that next part. So as I mentioned before, it's not the easiest template in the world, but the results are definitely worth it. So I've got sort of a bit of a long edge here. So to do that, I'm going to lay some fibre down that's overhanging the outside of the template. Run my needle along that edge and then bring these fibres back over, and again making sure I get that overlap. With all of the templates, you're going to notice that there are a couple of areas that generally I find are weak spots, and it's these guys here, and it's specifically around that corner, because I think what happens is when you lay down the fibres, all of these fibres are laying down that way and all of these fibres are laying down that way, and you've got to pay a little bit of extra attention to these sort of round the point bits, and I'll show you how I do that in just a bit. The weights and measures that I've put up are based on unwired leaves. If you're going to add in an armature, you may want to consider increasing the weight of fibre that you put in. And there's no real hard and fast rules about how much wool or how you put the wire and the wool in on top. You can put half of the weight of wool in, then put your wire armature in, and then put in the other half of the wool on top, so you get that sort of layered sandwich for your wires. You can alternatively make the leaf, put the wire armature on the back, and then you can dot a little bit of glue and use some fluff to cover it over. So there's no set way that you absolutely must do it. It all depends on your project and what you're going to use them for. I'm just going to show you how mainly to fill the template. For expediency, if you're doing the armature, doing the leaf, putting the armature on the back and then sort of covering it over is, I believe, the quickest and easiest way of doing it. So another, oops, that's not enough. I've filled in most of this half now, a little bit thin here. So what I'm going to do now is come to the other side. And none of this is, it's loosely attached to my mat. You might be able to just see a couple of fibres there, but it's not really sort of felted to the mat. So just a little bit up in there, bring that down. As long as you get that overlay, And obviously do be aware that any overlay or when you're overlapping, the amount of wool is doubling, so you don't want as much wool here as you've got up in here. So I've got another one of those long edges, so I'm overlapping the edge with some of the fibre running around that edge and then pulling those fibres over. Once we start firming this up, it'll go quite quickly. But the sycamore it's a beautiful shape. It's just a pain. So I'm going to pop that a little bit in there. And I can see it's a little bit thin over there, so I'm going to just take this that way. And again, just using the first barb or two on my needle. And then finally down into this last little bit. Let's get a good piece up in the end. And the weights and measures are just a guide. You know, if you need to use a little pinch more, use a little pinch more. Or if you do one and you think, no, I want mine to be super thin, then, you know, just adjust it. But what you want to do is make sure you've got a nice even cover. A little bit down in. And obviously I'm having to move my mat around to accommodate. I think trying to watch me felt upside down is not going to be pretty. So there we go. That's the template filled. Just about. It's really thin in the middle here, so I'm going to take this extra bit and pop that down in the middle, and it's always worth having a little bit like this. Just a minute, let me grab that out. What is that? There we go. And spread it out. A few tacking stabs all over, just to start holding it in place right across your leaf. I'm going to very lightly come in with my multi-punch. Now again, a dense surface like the flat mat is really going to be your friend here, because as your needles hit that denseness, you're going to stop, which means you're only going to be going so far into or through your project. And I am just bouncing off of the flat mat, and this, I call it bouncing, because as soon as I feel the mat, I'm just bouncing back up off of it. I'm not putting any pressure on, there's no driving at all. All over like that, and it's just lightly, very lightly in the middle. And then back with my single needle, and again, first barb, I'm not using all of this, just going around those edges and bringing in that frizz. There. And brace yourself. If you now take that off, you've got this wonderful leaf that's somewhat attached to your surface. So when you take your template off, don't be tempted just to grab your leaf and pull. What you want to do is just tickle it off very gently, just go all over, and you end up with something that looks nothing like your template. But that's okay. You just want something that's holding together. I mean, it looks like a hot fluffy mess now, but that's just got the initial fibres laid down. That's used all of my 1.5 grams that I had weighed out. So we'll probably use a pinch more, but take your time just getting your fluff back into place in your template. From here on in, it shouldn't, she says, it shouldn't stick to the mat really anymore, because we're going to be using nice light, and I call it a compacting technique. There may be an official term for it, but I don't have it. So there's my fluff back in my template, and I'm always going to keep, for now anyway, this side facing the mat. The side that faces the flat, particularly the flat mat, it does come out with a much nicer, smoother finish. We will be turning it over, because in order to get the definition in this leaf, we are really going to be felting this quite firmly. Once you've got it back down in your template, I'm just going to use my single needle. Now, this compacting technique that I'm talking about, let's zoom in. I'll do it just here so you can see the difference. It's just the first, where's my first barb? There's the first barb on the needle, and there's the second one, and it's really just using the last 10 mil of the needle, and it's tiny little stabs in a little circular motion, and you just go all over every little bit. So again, there's no driving into your mat, it's just that first 10 mil of your needle, and you can see how it's starting to compact it. And once you've done that a little bit, oops, let me just get this back down in here. Once you've done it, then you just give your template a little bit of a wiggle on your mat, and then if you have got any tiny little fibres adhering to your mat, and that way, unlike what I just did, your fluff should, or your template and fluff should stay together. What I'm going to do is change up to my 3 needle for this compacting technique. Now, you don't have to have one of these needles or one of these handles. I like this one because it's got the 3 needles in a nice straight line, and I'm pretty sure that these are 40s in here as well. So that compacting technique, little bit of a wiggle, compacting technique, little bit of a wiggle. And once you've started to compact it, I'm just going to quickly go over the rest of this real quickly. Once you've gone over and done that initial compacting technique, then we're going to come back and just have a look for any thin spots, any bits that need a little bit of reinforcement. Remember, I said around these pointed areas. And once you've got a little bit of refinement in the shape, that's a good time to just go back and check. You can always add a little bit more fibre. So there. That's sort of the compacting technique pass number 1, and it's probably one of 5, 6 passes that I generally do. It you know, it really depends. And again, I'm doing this leaf one colour, but I mean, there are so many permutations of toning and shading and veining that I simply couldn't cover them all in a tutorial. This colouring here is, I believe, the autumn gold and lichen. This one is our cranberry colour with wine, just in case you're interested. Coming back in with my multi-punch, and the multi-punch is good for the sort of the wider areas. Obviously you're not going to get up into the tips, but again, it's for speed, and I'm using that bouncing technique. Righty, so pass number 1 of the compacting technique, and I'm just going to go, I still feel that I'm a little bit thin in the middle, but so I'm going to pull off another pinch, and that's probably about 0.1, maybe 0.15. Oh, I'll weigh it for you guys. 0.1, and I'm just going to use that in this middle bit. So single needle just to lay the fibres down, dot about just to get it tacked down in various different places, and then really lightly with the multi-punch and a little bit of a wiggle. The more this firms up, the less you will find it will stick to your mat and things like that. So let's see. Yeah, I'm much happier with that. I might need to put a little bit more in there, but we'll see. So compacting pass number 2. And again, it's just all over with those tiny little stabs, getting right up into those little points. Now if you feel, I'll show you these little pointy bits, it's a really small amount, and instead of laying the fibres this way, I'm going to make them sort of go across that way. Might actually be easier if I show you with a quick contrasting colour. So I will do this in the same colour, but I'm going to put the fibres sort of that way so that they're running and joining a little bit around and a little bit that way, and then that will just strengthen these sort of points, which I generally find can come out a little weak and runs the risk of pulling apart. So I'm going to do that. I think that one's all right. This one might need a little bit. Single needle again, and it's just focusing on strengthening up around that point. And then anything that's not, they're just allowed to sort of frizz out into the rest of your project. And don't forget to wiggle. I think that one's okay. I'll check on the next compacting pass. So back to compacting it down. And what I would say is when you think it's done, go over it once or twice more. These really do benefit from being nice and firm. And you can probably see, let's zoom in a little bit, you can see the difference. This hasn't had a compacting pass, number 2, and this side has. And it does make a great difference. So I'm going to go over this again, and then probably 1 or 2 times more. In between, just check your thin spots. And I think what I will do is possibly speed up this footage a little bit. But I'm just using that compacting technique and then the bouncing technique with my multi-punch. So a couple more passes of that to really get it nice and firm. There we go. Okay, so there's our sycamore leaf, which is felted quite nice and firmly. So now what I'm going to do is pop it out of the template, and you can see this side is the side that I've been working on. It's got all these sort of pitty needle marks, but if you turn it over, look at the other side. The joy of the flat mat. It does give a much nicer finish. But pop your leaf down. What I'm now going to do is knock the stuffing out of it using my clattering tool. And this is quite driving, so we are going right through the project. Now that we've got some firmness to it, we can do a little bit of a driving motion, just lift it from the mat and it will hold itself together. And by going all over like this at this point, it does give it a little bit of a thinner sort of profile. You can see, I mean, it's messing up the back, it's all furry again now, but back into the template, which now will be infinitely easier. You need to get it to this sort of level of firmness for this to really work. All the way round, just getting in those edges, and your single needle is your best friend for these tiny, teeny little points. All over again. Once you've flattened it out with the clattering tool or the multi-punch, then it will spread, it will distort a little. So get it back in, and then all of the spread will come up around the sides of the template. So you just felt that straight back down in, and that helps give you a really nice, good, strong edge. Turn it round, work on the other side. So I would probably do 2 more compacting passes. So this is pass number 1. But then what I'm going to do is turn it over, and I'm going to do the compacting pass on the other side, and you can see, look at that finish. lovely. And again, first barb of the needle, we're really up into the realms of very, very firm now. And if you really use more than the first barb on your needle, you'll probably, there you go, you'll impale your project. On cue. This is getting very, very firm now. So other side. Multi-punch, bouncing technique all over and all over this side. I must say I'm loving this new colour. It's gorgeous. This is the autumn gold. And there, look, there's your, zoom out a bit, there's your leaf. Now obviously we've got a few frizzy bits, but we'll deal with that in just a minute. And you can see that because we spent the time just going around those points, that these bits now have got some real sort of integrity to them. They're not going to pull apart. But if you do get to this point and it kind of goes meh, then pop it back in the template, go to the point that you need to reinforce. And this is the great thing about the templates, is no matter what you do, you can always put your project back into the template and bring it back into shape. And if that's the case, then just add a little bit more wool around that point and blend it out into the rest of your project. So you can always pop it back. So once you've done that, grab yourself a little snippy pair of scissors, and what I would do is just go round and give it a teeny tiny little bit of a trim. Any really wild loose hairs. Now you can do this now. You may or may not want to iron your leaf. It's entirely up to you. I like to, with the Sycamore, I like to give it a tiny little bit of a trim now, and then I'll do it again after I've ironed. But I just want to take off, see these little bits here that are completely out there, and you're always going to get them. So we'll pretend that I've gone all the way around it for speed. There's our leaf. Now, I'm not going to iron this. I am going to iron this. I will iron this and then I can show you the ironing process as well. What I will do before I iron it is I will off of camera just go round the rest of this and trim the little frizzy bits. If you want to add a little more definition to your template, you can to your leaf, you can see that, you know, the definition, the template will give you the best possible shape it can out of the template for working with felting, but particularly a leaf like this does need a little bit of extra refinement. And if you just want to exaggerate those indentations and get your needle on a horizontal angle, I'm perhaps doing this a little bit too exaggerating, but the wool will go the way that you point the needle. This also does offer you the opportunity to you can put extra little indents in places if you want the leaves to have a slightly different look. So right down into these little bits, these little points, and then you can just go round, and I'll zoom in here. So your needle hold your project, and your needle is going into your project at that kind of angle, so not up or down. The wool will go the way you point the needle. There. I want to make that a little more indented, so you can really exaggerate. And as I said, I'm going to put an extra one in there, just to give that top a little bit of a different shape. You know, it's really your vision of it from here on in. But if you want to get some extra sort of definition and exaggeration, so here's a nice rounded edge. If I wanted to do a little bit there, then just hold, and you can see you can put a little tick in it there. So that's how to give yourself a little bit of extra definition to the leaf for finally finishing it off. You can put veining if you're doing felting veining. These have got stitched veining on them, and I'm not going to sit here and do sewing and all sorts on camera, but this is embroidery floss, and that is about three strings. So I know embroidery floss is you can pull it apart, so that's about 3 and then stitched. I'm going to show you how to do felting veining, and you can do it before or after you iron. It's entirely up to you. You may not be ironing, at which point you want to do it now. I'm gonna use this colour, which is our autumn green colour, and get autumn green and autumn gold. I'm going to start by putting the vein dead centre. So if you're wiring, or if you haven't wired already, then before you do this little refinement, you're going to put your wire on the back, if you haven't done in the middle thing, and cover it all over, firm it all up, get it to this point. Now, to do a nice straight line, grab yourself a piece of wool. Now our wool is short fibre, so you want to roll it until you start getting a nice thin piece, and sort of pull and stretch a little bit. Now if it's, I don't know what wool you'll be using, but if you've got wool that's starting to pull apart, so roll it up a little bit, and then with the first barb only of your needle, just go over it. And what that will do is just knit the fibres together and give them a bit of rigidity, so they won't pull apart. So the first vein that I'm going to put is going to be here, and I'm going to start at the top of where I want my vein to end, and I'm just going to push through. Actually decide which, yeah, this is going to be the front of my leaf. And once you've got that part anchored, take this and twist it. Twist it, and if you twist, it twists all the fibres, obviously, but it gives you a much neater line, and then you just stab down over it and you will get a very nice line, and it's good and straight. And this applies to if you're putting a line on something, anything, even a 3D object, you know, that pull and twist. Now what I'm going to do is just take my little snippy scissors, snip that little bottom bit off, and just felt those fibres in ever so lightly. Now I'm going to make a thin line, very thin line. Try. So I'm going to use this, I'm going to pull it out, just knit them together, because as you're doing that twisting you're going to be pulling it a little bit, so you don't want them all to break off. But if you do, if your fibres do come away, then just go back in and overlay very slightly the end of the last bit that you've put down. Right, so I'm going to pop that, anchor that there, and then just start giving it a bit of a twist, and then lay that down. You can see how thin there. And there you go. So that's how to get yourself a nice thin line of felting, veining. And I'll just put one more. So again, roll it up. Let me just snip the unruly bits off, anchor it, twist and lay it down, and then just first barb of your needle. You don't want to be driving right out the other side. You want to be attaching it but not driving it. So you'll get a little bit come through at the back but not much. So there, that's how to get some nice defined lines with felting. So basically what happened was, during putting on the veins and everything, and after saying I'm going to iron the leaf, I just carried on and didn't iron the leaf. So what I've done is I'm coming back to just show you the ironing part, because it is something that you can choose obviously to do or not to do depending on your preference. And if you do want a real nice smooth finish, or indeed a really thin leaf, then ironing is definitely a very good friend to have. So I've got my leaf. So obviously when we get to the next bit of the footage, the leaf will be unironed again, but you'll get the general idea. Here's our leaf, and if you want to retain the thickness of the leaf but just want to give yourself that nice surface, now I've got my iron on full steam and on a linen setting, and I only use this ironing board for petals and leaves. So if you're using your own ironing board, then you might want to put something else down to cover it. It's entirely up to you. If you want to keep the thickness of the leaf, then what you're going to do is just gently glide the iron over the surface, but you're not going to put any pressure on the leaf. Turn it over and glide it over the other side. Just allow a bit of that steam to penetrate, and there you go. If you want to make this nice and thin, or even thinner, then you'll want pressure and a little bit of a wiggle. Don't drive, because that will distort your leaf a bit too much. So it's just pressure, little bit of a wiggle, and I do that a couple of times on each side, and then what you end up with is a beautifully thin leaf and a gorgeous finish. Now obviously if you've got an armature in here, then do be aware that any wires will be really hot, but there we go. So I thought I would just show you the ironing part, and now we'll hop back and finish off the video. There is also the option of stitching, and you can even draw on your felted leaf with Sharpie. So there you go, different leaves and different ways to shade them, different ways to you know, assemble. I'll pop these back out, and there's the one we've just made. These have got little bits of pipe cleaner as a stem. You know, you don't necessarily need this one doesn't have an armature in it in this part, but there's a little loop of pipe cleaner there which comes out, and then we've wrapped the stem in wool. So there are lots and lots of options. There's a large one in green that I made earlier. There's a small one. Yes, there are oodles and oodles of possibilities with this template. They make absolutely beautiful additions to wreaths and to other decorative pieces. So the sky is the limit with this. It's such a beautiful leaf, and I can't wait to go and play with it some more. That, I believe, is it from me. If you've got any questions at all, please do feel free to shoot me a message. And again, please do give this video a like, subscribe to the channel if you aren't already, and we'd love to have you with us for future videos. One other thing I'd like to point out is our Facebook group. It's over on Facebook, which is facebook.com/groups/mumsmakery. We have lots and lots of fun, and everybody shares their makes. There's such a great bunch of people over there. Right, well, that's it. That's the Sycamore set from me. That's available over on the website, which is mumsmakery.co.uk. Thank you very much for spending your time with me, and I wish you all a very crafty day.